what's up? Check this out.
The voice of the revolution. American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
Well, we had a great debate on our forum here last month regarding peace and justice, and people, weighing in on what is more important, peace or justice. And many people agree that there isn't any peace without justice, and I might add accountability. We have seen our government run roughshod over the rights and the liberties of American people, as we constantly dictate on this program and tell you about. But where is the accountability for all of this? Oh, well, we've got a new president now, so whatever happened in the last administration, we'll just let it go. Kind of like, Iran-Contra, to name one of the many scandals that have just really been painted over as we constantly move on to change and to hope. Last week, Newsweek reported that the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility, the OPR, had a report on the actions of Judge Bybee and his subordinates. It has been edited to remove the finding of misconduct. No misconduct on their behalf. That was reached in the report's original version. This alteration occurred after Judge Bybee and other subjects of the report were permitted to review and suggest changes to it themselves. Newsweek concludes the original finding would have triggered a referral to the State Bar Association for potential disciplinary action, in which Bybee's case could have led to an impeachment inquiry. There are major NGOs, there are lots of people out there that want accountability for these so-called torture documents that were supplied by John Yoo and Judge Bybee to the Bush administration and to Alberto Gonzales and a long list of others who wanted to justify torturing our so-called enemies. Kevin Zeese is with us on behalf of DisbarTortureLawyers.com, DisbarTortureLawyers.com. Kevin Zeese was the spokesperson, press secretary for Ralph Nader's 2004 presidential campaign. He writes for the great Counterpunch. He's also been published in USA Today, The Wall Street Journal, The Washington Post, as well as web outlets like Common Dreams, Alternate, Dissident Voice, Raw Story, LouRockwell.com, and Z Magazine. He's the author of several books. He joins us now on the program to discuss this matter. Kevin, great to have you with us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Probably wouldn't have heard about this hadn't it been for your press release. This wasn't a big story that came out in the news.
Well, it's one of those things we don't want to talk about too loudly because it's kind of embarrassing that the Department of Justice is about to issue a report that finds lawyers who facilitate a war crime just had bad judgment and don't deserve any kind of disciplinary proceeding. It's a pitiful decision that I'm sure that the Department of Justice hopes no one pays attention to.
Yeah, there's all kinds of rules to be a member of the bar, to be an attorney practicing in this country. Apparently, advising on the torture of children isn't a problem for them.
Yeah, there are lots of laws, and there are bodies that review disciplinary proceedings, and we have filed 15 complaints in bar associations around the country against lawyers who worked for the Bush administration, 2 of which were held over and also worked for the Obama administration, to seek their disbarment or some kind of disciplinary proceeding. I think that's going to be much more difficult and less likely now that the Office of Professional Responsibility is trying to put this under the rug. I expect the bars will follow that. So we've decided, along with a bunch of other groups, to change course and to focus on Judge Jay Bybee, who is a sitting judge in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Court of Appeals is the court below the U.S. Supreme Court, so he's one of the highest-ranking judges in the United States. He was heavily involved in the torture issue, approving torture in the Department of Justice, and we don't think that someone like that is appropriate to have on the bench, and so we're going to be pushing for his impeachment.
Well, they also were involved, both Bybee and you, in contracting sweeping powers to the White House, which we saw almost in a dictatorial fashion for 8 years. Kevin, we both lived through that, thankfully.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know, but can you do this for me? For people who aren't familiar, we have covered this. We haven't, covered it recently, but take us back to the memos. Take us back to what you and Bybee did for the Bush administration, and if you can fill in, kind of build the case here of why this is such a problem.
Well, people can go to DisbarTortureLawyers.com and see the details of this. But basically, after 9/11, the Bush administration took a unique approach. They decided that all rules were off. They started to describe things like the Geneva Convention as a quaint relic of history. and decided that they were going to go as far as they could aggressively to pursue people they suspected, and that would mean including the use of torture. And initially what happened was the first incidences of torture, which included waterboarding and other well-known tactics, were approved by CIA lawyers and the White House lawyer, who at that time was Alberto Gonzales, before the Department of Justice reviewed it. And they were actually, the torturers were actually in daily contact with these lawyers, asking advice on what they can do and what they can't do. So lawyers were critically involved. And when this program started to develop, they realized they needed some legal guidance, some legal cover, really. There were a number of agents at the FBI, which opposed torture, by the way. The FBI didn't want anything to do with it. Their recognition is that torture doesn't work. It's actually counterproductive and results in more false information than good information. But the people who were involved in torture, Department of Defense and CIA, were very insecure. They felt like they were risking prosecution for war crimes, and they needed some cover. And so the White House went to the Department of Justice for a ruling on this. And the two people most involved in that were you and Bybee. They were pressured. The Department of Justice was pressured pretty aggressively. You can see in emails now.
Not me, but John Yoo and Bybee.
Yeah, John Yoo. Yeah, that's right. You could see in emails now. Some emails have been released that there was a lot of pressure on the Department of Justice to come up with a ruling. And there was a lot of division in the Department of Justice. There are people in the Department of Justice who thought it was a bad idea, that someday that the Department of Justice would regret this, and I think they probably have now. But they pushed, and John Yoo and Bybee basically authored memos that facilitated torture, and they did it by redefining torture, as long as it's leaving lasting scars or hurt any organs or risk death, which is torture is so clearly defined in the law, both in U.S. criminal law as well as international law. The Convention Against Torture is very clear that the only way they could get away with saying that this was legal was to redefine torture. Now, of course, a lawyer at the Department of Justice does not have the right or the authority to rewrite a law or rewrite a treaty. But that's essentially what these memos did. They kind of made the law up themselves.
Well, we see them do this every day with our Bill of Rights, and to say that it's nothing new, I guess, is kind of a bit of a whitewash on this too. But they also redefined in these memos habeas corpus. I mean, this is the framework of our justice system.
Oh yeah, this has been a disaster. I mean, we've seen our constitutional rights, our criminal justice rights eroded really for decades. I mean, the war on drugs, I think, in the 1980s was a major cause of erosion of civil liberties and rights in court, right to counsel, right to bail, search and seizure rights, all sorts of things were weakened by the war on drugs. But when we now get to the war on terrorism, it's like the war on drugs on steroids as far as erosion of rights go. We are seeing a rapid decline. It's like a snowball picking up speed going down a mountain. And it's just rapidly rolling and undermining what this country really stands for. And in many ways, this makes the well,
they're really one and the same, aren't they? We saw the report come out here about 6 months ago. 99.9% of the illegal searches taking place, the sneak and peeks as they've called them, by the FBI and by police powers, were for drug enforcement and weren't for terrorism at all. This was all under the Patriot Act, which is supposed to catch terrorists, not to be used against criminals.
That's right. And that's often been the case. You see these kinds of law enforcement techniques used in various ways for various purposes. The drug war is cover for other military actions. It's just it's an amazing military law enforcement complex that works so well together to really push their agenda, and they've gained so much power and funding. Constitutional rights have been weakened. They have more power to search and seize and eavesdrop, et cetera. You can't recognize the Constitution. When I went to law school back in the 1970s, compared to what we see today, it's a whole different country. It's not the same country anymore when you look at what the Constitution stands for.
And these people define, when you say they define suspected terrorists, it is defined, isn't it, Kevin, in the loosest possible manner. I mean, it could just be the littlest thing, as we've talked about. Some of the guys at Gitmo were chicken farmers and goat herders, were rounded up for rewards leading up into the war, and they had nothing to do. I mean, there's no proof, no evidence they had anything to do with terrorism. I guess after being waterboarded and tortured, maybe they're terrorists now.
That's right. That's right. And so now the Department of Justice has kind of swept this under the rug, it's time for the Congress to step up as an equal branch of government for John Conyers and Senator Leahy, Pat Leahy, to take their chairmanship responsibility seriously and do something to deal with this issue, so it does not remain a stain on our character.
Yeah, and a lot of this by John Yoo in particular, really nasty stuff, isn't it, Kevin? I want to refer to an event December 1st, 2005. John Yoo, who's is mentioned in your case, he appeared in a debate in Chicago with University of Notre Dame law professor Doug Castle. During the debate, Castle asked Yoo, quote, if the president deems that he's got to torture somebody, including by crushing the testicles of the person's child, there's no law that can stop him. To which you replied, no treaty. Castle then followed up with also, to clarify, also no law by Congress. That is what you wrote in the August 2002 memo, to which you replied, I think it depends on why the president thinks he needs to do that. So he just admits it, but again, it's a semantical argument for them.
And the Obama Justice Department is just calling this a bad judgment. This is facilitation of a war crime. How can we? And what's so important about this is it's now creating essentially a de facto exception to the torture laws. That anyone in the future, when you're in another administration or this current administration, decides that they need to torture somebody or in other ways violate international law or domestic law for military purposes or war on terror purposes, there's now a de facto exception that protects them. They now can expect that they will not be prosecuted and they get away with this kind of war crime activity. It's really a major, major error on President Obama's part, this idea of not looking back. You have to look back. When a crime is committed, that's the only way you can enforce a law,
Kevin,
being broken.
They never look back.
And they have to. How do you enforce? How do you enforce a law against murder or rape? You can't arrest the rapist before the rape happens. You've got to look back.
Actually, they do that. Yeah, it's called a thought crime or a pre-crime.
Well, that's coming. That's coming.
No, it's here.
Yeah. Well,
if you look at a DUI, for instance. Here in Texas, it's illegal to be drunk in a bar in Texas. Can you believe that? They'll arrest you.
I saw someone, I can't remember what it was, who was arrested the other day for being in a car that could not, he was drunk and fell asleep. His keys were in the console, in the box in the console. The car could not even run, and he was arrested for DUI.
Yeah,
and it was upheld by the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, that happened to a friend of mine. But, this is a minor inconvenience compared to having your child's testicles crushed under John Hughes' suggestion.
That's right.
Also, regarding the Fourth Amendment, you also authored the October 23rd, 2001 memo asserting that the president had sufficient power to allow the NSA to monitor the communications of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil without a warrant because the Fourth Amendment does not apply to this.
So
and they caught Jane Harmon with this very thing, trying to cover up AIPAC spying, which we mentioned earlier on our program.
That's right. So what does this mean about now the Department of Justice under the Obama administration? This makes them essentially conspirators after the fact, covering up war crimes. And the question is, why are they doing that? I mean, is it politics to get along with the Republicans, or is it because now they are? The UN is already saying that Obama is committing war crimes with his drone attacks, killing civilians. So is this just now Obama recognizing if he holds other people accountable, he may be held accountable?
Yes. Well, and he doesn't want to indict his cousin and his friends. They're all cousins, right? I mean, let's just be honest. Well, what about hope and change? I assume you're probably a little more to the left than I am, but
I was not
I don't know if you supported Obama to begin with. But
I didn't either. I didn't support Obama either.
I voted for McKinney, man. But
I voted for Nader, of course. He's a friend of mine. But throughout the campaign, as director of Voters for Peace, which is votersforpeace.us, we put out reports on what Obama was saying, and not falling for that line in his speech, I will end the Iraq war, but looking at the details. He never promised to truly end the war. He said he'd bring home combat troops, but he was going to leave behind tens of thousands of other troops and tens of thousands of mercenaries, totaling about 120,000 troops and mercenaries total. That was ending the war. And he talked about attacking Pakistan. He talked about expanding Afghanistan. He talked about supporting Israel no matter what they did. He talked about making the military budget bigger, adding 100,000 more troops. This was a war hawk campaign, and the peace movement made a gigantic mistake in not criticizing him throughout the campaign for it.
Well, we did. I
Well,
did.
so did I.
Cynthia McKinney did. Cindy Sheehan did. You should have seen what happened to us during that election. My career took a major hit, okay? I mean, these guys are concerned with people like you and I, Kevin, and they show it. They really bear their fangs when you start getting in their way. I want to talk about what you guys are doing about this. I know you have a big national protest on February 4th. I want to get that all out. But I also want to kind of go into this kind of semantical argument in a way because you said, the CIA was against torture. Well,
the FBI, I said. FBI was.
Yeah, but okay, so we're talking with, I guess, the FBI too, but primarily the CIA. I mean, these terrorists, the real alleged terrorists out there, are the ones that the CIA funded into existence and trained.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is a long history of problems that when we essentially created Al Qaeda, we trained some of their leaders, and so it's just now it's coming back to haunt us. This is the classic case of the chickens coming home to roost.
So the biggest problem I have with the torture and the interrogations is I don't really believe there is such a thing as a terrorism as we're being told. I don't think it's as big as a threat as we're being told.
Well, I think that's a very key thing, and that's the answer to why Bush. So they like to claim Bush protected us after 9/11. Well, the reality was he so exaggerated the threat of terrorism that protecting us was not as great a problem as it's and really this is a small criminal gang that we have empowered rather than using the appropriate tools, which would have been a SWAT team, law enforcement, bring them the justice approach. We took 2 wars in place, put bazookas. It's like bazookas trying to kill flies. And as a result, we keep making more and more enemies, become the biggest recruiter for Al Qaeda and for other, spin-offs of Al Qaeda, insurgent and terrorist groups that are now angry at us for a damn good reason.
Well, yeah, and you look at those Abu Ghraib. Janet Karpinski's a friend of ours, and she was the general in charge there. Where one night things went crazy and run amok. They couldn't wait to get those out so that the other alleged terrorists could see them, almost as if they leaked them on purpose. And then we've got something like a P2OG, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which says if the terrorists aren't doing anything, then you've got to pretend to be the terrorists, which they did. We've caught them in multiple occasions, including with Blackwater recently in Iraq and Pakistan, pretending to be the terrorists so we can catch the terrorists.
That's right.
Detention, release. So I've got a very important question. I was kind of getting to that when we come back. And then Kevin Zeese will join us, and I want to talk about what we can do to help you to make examples out of these people that go outside of the Constitution and do this so that no one else will do it again. Kevin Zeese with us. You're listening to Deadline Live. Jack Blood, AmericanFreedomRadio.com, and all of our great affiliates. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us on the program today. I want to welcome a couple of new affiliates. You know who you are. I won't mention you by name. Don't worry. We don't want John Yoo coming after you. I'm Jack Blood. You're listening to Deadline Live only on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And again, all of our great affiliates, thank you for picking up the show. Kevin Zeese is with us. I've been reading you, Kevin, for a long time. You make a lot of sense. I love your contributions at Anti-War and Lou Rockwell, and I think we probably agree on most things. And I appreciate what you guys are doing in Velvet Revolution and disbar torture lawyers. I want accountability. Each and every one of my listeners want accountability. They're sick of seeing all of this just go under the bridge, and then the next guy comes in, promises not to do it, he does it, the next guy comes in, he pardons that guy, and it just continues and continues on. But I've got to ask you this question because I have thought about the issue of torture quite a bit. All right, Kevin?
Yeah.
Here's the question. Keeping in mind that probably everything we're being told is fake, but let's just say it's true. Let's give the media and the government the benefit of the doubt that there's a terrorist under every bush, not a bush under every terrorist. But I ask myself this question, all others who oppose torture and rendition, and this is the question. If your child was kidnapped, you're pretty sure who had him or her, would you consider torturing the suspect to get your child back? Because I have a hard time with that question.
Of course I would, but when you get to that's why individuals don't make those decisions about their own family. You know, I would also kill someone who raped my wife. I mean, you know, that's a different story. When a government is doing things, they need to step back and they're not as emotionally attached to the situation, and they look at it from what is effective, what is legal, what can really be done. And when you look at it from that perspective, take your emotions out as a victim, or your family as a victim. You take your emotions out of it, and you look at it, you see that torture doesn't work. It provides more false information than accurate information. That torture is illegal, and finally, that by torturing, you will actually increase torture. You'll increase people who hate you and your family, or you and your government, depending on what the situation is. So, you know, there's two different. Obviously, a personal reaction is an emotional one that does not take into those account. But as a government, you have a different approach and different responsibilities, and you have different kind of analysis.
Well, I appreciate the honest answer, because I pretty much agree word for word with what you just said. Now, the Newsweek piece that we mentioned earlier, if this is true, the OPR report, it shows it's been manipulated to give torture lawyers a free pass. Congress should immediately launch a full-scale investigation. Oh, my
Exactly.
God, they're investigating themselves again. I don't know if that's the answer, but what is the answer?
Well, that is the answer under our system. The Congress is supposed to be a separate but equal branch of government. It has the responsibility to investigate these kinds of crimes. Whether or not the Department of Justice acts is a separate question. If the Department of Justice has found differently, the Congress still should be doing its own investigation. The Congress still should be pursuing impeachment. You know, we've had impeachment 18 times in the United States. It's been pursued. Only twice they've been acquitted. 16 times they've been convicted. 14 of those 18, by the way, were judges. So it's not a unique thing to impeach a judge. And to have a judge on the second highest court in the country, a federal court of appeals, who is so weak on individual rights, on basic criminal justice rights, and on torture, how would you like to be a criminal defendant with an appeal before a three-judge panel where this is one of your three judges?
Yeah, no kidding.
That's not justice. It doesn't pass the straight face that you're going to get justice from this kind of a judge. And making impeachment even stronger is that when Judge Bybee was confirmed, the information about his torture involvement was not known. In fact, when later torture memo writer Michael Haynes was before the Senate and his torture involvement was known, he was withdrawn as a candidate because he could not pass. Bybee would not have passed if the Senate had known his involvement in torture. He would not be a federal judge if he had not lied by keeping a secret that was very relevant to what the Senate was considering.
It seems to me, now I don't know all the rules here, but it seems to me that the Obama administration can just take the guy out and fire him. I mean, look what happened to the justices back during the Karl Rove administration, the Dick Cheney administration. I mean, can they do that? Or
no, they can't do that. The only way to remove a federal judge is a lifetime appointee. The only way to remove a federal judge is through impeachment. And so it's up to and the process is basically a few steps. The first step is an investigation into impeachment by the House. Then the House votes on whether to impeach or not. When the House votes, that's kind of like voting like a grand jury, issuing an indictment. That's what articles of impeachment are. Then it goes to the Senate for a trial. And the Senate holds a trial and votes on whether or not to convict, essentially, to fulfill the indictment of the House. If they vote to convict, then the person is impeached and removed from office. And that should be what happens in this case. This guy lied by keeping a secret to get into the office. If the Senate had known what he stood for, they would not have approved him.
Right.
Now he's there. We cannot, as a nation, let a judge be there who is a war crime facilitator.
Well, Bybee, you, others, clearly violated their oath of office and the rules of legal ethics. I think there is grounds here to do this. Now, what are you guys doing, and what can we do to help you guys?
Well, I think that the key to making this happen, the most important thing about this is one more example that is something we see repeated over and over again, and that is the citizens have to act. The people have to act. The two people we need to pressure are John Conyers and Senator John Leahy, the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Senate, and the House Judiciary Committee. Those are where the power is to start this process. And people need to contact them and urge the impeachment be pursued. They need to hear from you. This is an election year. This is a year when we have more power than we usually do, because these people want to get reelected and they want their parties to get reelected. So this is the time to really raise our flag and really push hard for justice. And justice in this case means bringing Bybee to an impeachment trial. And so it takes citizens to get organized. You can go to disbartorturelawyers.com. You can get involved there and sign up. I'm involved in that campaign with hundreds of other organizations. My organization, VotersForPeace.us, is another organization that's working on this with the broad coalition. You go to VotersForPeace.us, sign up there, get involved not only in that, but we also do anti-war activities. You can get involved in that as well. So there are ways you can work in a coalition with lots of other people. You won't be alone doing this. And so your voice will have a multiplied effect, because there'll be lots of people saying the same thing over and over again, a chorus letting them know. Now, we often in this country feel frustrated that we feel like our voices don't matter, but the truth is they do matter. And we really can make a difference. People need to avoid this feeling of disempowerment on issue after issue. We can make a difference if we get organized and get active, but we have to get active. You can't just say it doesn't work and don't try. You've got to try. And sometimes you can't tell how close you are. You're trying and seem to be getting nowhere, but you can be very close to success. In fact, sometimes when the system stiffens its back most is when it's at its weakest, because they are feeling threatened. And I think that's where we are right now with this and other issues as well, on the economy and other issues. The system is feeling threatened. And so it's kind of like knocking on a wall. You're hitting a wall, breaking it through, trying to get through the wall, and all you see is dark, and you can't break through. What could be left is paper thin, and it's still dark.
No, true that. I talk about this all the time. A lot of times we'll get to the 10-yard line and just give up.
Exactly. You don't know how close you are.
We have won a lot of battles. We like to talk about those on our program, Kevin. I'm not just one here to sit and complain and whine all the time about the things that are wrong. I like to go out and show people that we can win and we can get involved and make progress. Your allies have also planned protests at courthouses of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in 3 West Coast cities Thursday, February 4th. That's in 2 days. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you can actually see a story on that on the top of VotersForPeace.us. We just put a story up there about that. There's going to be protests at 3 courthouses focused on impeaching Judge Bybee. Now, this is not the first time. There have been other times that people go into the courtrooms and, in a respectful way, when the argument is over, they stand up with signs that say "Impeach Bybee." They need to know the justices on that court, the judges on that court, need to know that their credibility is being undermined by being associated with a torture judge like Jay Bybee.
That's the only way to stop this from continuing through another 4 to 8 years, isn't it?
That's right. We have, it's always this way. The reality is, citizen action is what makes change happen. People are foolish to think that a knight on a white horse, whether it's President Obama or President Bush, whatever your predilection is, a knight on a white horse is not going to save us. It was not LBJ who gave us the Civil Rights Act. It was the Civil Rights Movement. It was not Woodrow Wilson who gave women the right to vote. It was women demanding the right to vote. It was not Richard Nixon who ended the war. It was the anti-war movement and the Vietnamese people. People being organized is what makes change happen. The politicians follow that, and the same is true today. President Obama and the Democratic Congress is running scared right now. Their base is angry at them. Their base is turned off. They're losing elections in Massachusetts.
So they gave us no more don't tell, whatever.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Don't ask, don't tell. Isn't that interesting how Obama lost his battle for health care just as Clinton did? When Clinton lost his, he went right away and put in don't ask, don't tell. Yeah. Obama has done the opposite.
Well, those are the kinds of issues that they play with. These two parties that are too similar and not different enough, who are both funded by the same corporate backers. These two parties have wedge issues and for the right wing, it's gods, guns, and God's gun and gays, and for the left wing, it's gay rights and civil rights and urban rights. And so they play their bases that way. They put out these relatively unimportant, it's not totally unimportant, obviously, but relatively unimportant issues are put out there to try to satisfy the base. It's not going to work this time. The base of the Democratic Party is angry. They have losing heart in President Obama, and that's why our power is stronger now. They are threatened. They are afraid. They just lost a race in Massachusetts. These guys are insecure and running scared.
Kennedy's seat went to a teabagger. Is that enough
really,
for them? Do they understand?
It's an embarrassment, and so they're running scared. This is the time to pressure them. This is our powerful time to pressure them. This is one issue on which we can do so. It would not be a big thing, really, for the Democrats to begin impeachment of Jay Bybee, but it would be a hell of an opportunity for them to really put the spotlight on what was going on in the Bush administration in an election year. It'd be a very, I could easily see Conyers and Leahy and the Democratic leadership seeing this as an opportunity for them to show why you don't want to vote for Republicans.
Boy, Conyers, his wife is in hot water with her own ethics problems, and I don't know if that's the guy I want to hang my hat on.
I know it's a shame, but he's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Look, what are you going to do? He has the power. His wife is in serious trouble. I think she was being sentenced in December. I didn't see what happened with her sentence, but yeah, she's.
Well, it depends on what he does on issues like this, I think.
No, that's the problem. All these people, it's so easy to control any one person who's ambitious, doesn't want to lose their office, wants to advance to higher office, wants to keep their committee chairmanship. It is easy to pressure these people, but that's why it's so important for citizens to speak up and for us to show the Democratic leadership that it's in their interest to get their base active and angry about Republicans in this election year. I'm not a Democrat. I'm talking political strategy here, is how we can get this torture stuff dealt with in an election year, because I personally, I don't like either party.
You know what's interesting, Kevin? I think we kind of come from different sectors. I'm one of the right-wingers, so I'm not clinging to war or Bibles or any of that. I'm a pro-peace, pro-free market, paleo-conservative, and there you are, kind of like a paleo-liberal, and we can get together on these issues. So many, issues like this that we agree on, and here is the White House and everybody else trying to divide us and keep us separate.
Oh, that's exactly right. And I'm working on with a group of conservatives and progressives and people across the political spectrum who oppose war. We're having kind of a quiet meeting to begin the process of trying to develop a right-left anti-war coalition, doing that on February 20th. And we'll announce it publicly after it's over, but because it's a private meeting, about 30 of us getting together to start to chart out the course of how we can get the left and right working together to stop war, militarism, and empire.
There you go.
The guy who's funding it, by the way, is a Buchanan conservative, and the next issue he's concerned about is corporate welfare, which to me is one of my top issues. So peace and corporate welfare are my two top issues, because I think corporate welfare, this crony capitalism that controls and corrupts Congress, is what's holding back us on almost every issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Cartel capitalism, as it's also called, and it's not real capitalism, or it's not the real free market where at least in this situation we could vote with our dollars on this stuff, which I'd still like to be able to have going forward.
Well, I'll tell you, if they pass the insurance bill, that will be one option taken away on the health care, because you'll be forced to buy this corrupt insurance. It's a unique and unprecedented requirement to require people to buy insurance, a corrupt and faulty product like health insurance.
Well, we have to do it to drive our cars, but then again, it's incrementalism, isn't it? You know what I like about all of that, Kevin, is that the states, it's really put the states' backs against the wall, and it has tested the Ninth and 10th Amendments, and people are standing up to this like they have now for the Real ID and the PASS Act and some of these things that we can all get together on. I'll be in Valley Forge next month with Cindy Sheehan and a number of people from all sides of the political spectrum talking about peace, and talking about treason, talking about some of the issues we've talked about on today's program. VotersForPeace.com, right, Kevin?
VotersForPeace.us. And by the way, Cindy Sheehan is one of our board members, so I'm a fan of hers.
And give out the other website again. I don't have it in front of me.
Disbartorturelawyers.com.
Come on, folks, get on that. Pass that link around to everybody. Let's show what we can do together here, and let's send a message that people are going to be accountable for this kind of behavior. Kevin Zeese, great job on the show.
All right, thank you.
Good job.
All right, bye-bye.
Folks, we'll come right back.